live. That is Khalid and me.
Hi. So you lead the way. So should we do? Are we going to be jumping straight into the questions or introductions?
Um, I'm going to say that I met you yesterday at Speaker's Corner and we had a really good conversation, and you put our exchange on your channel, and my female friend was very complimentary about how you put things together, and so I was very happy about that, and you seem happy about the
I was
exchange.
very in the super impressed that your knowledge of Islam. You know, I keep forgetting. Are you a Muslim?
Um, I have been. No, I'm not. I'm not. But I suppose I've been studying Islam and the theology of Judaism and Christianity for some years now, and
Yeah.
it's
I asked because your knowledge of Islam was way more than the average Muslim in the things I was talking about. I was dreading that particular discussion, not because of you. I was dreading it because I was like, I thought it was too deep and complicated to talk about. And you were like, yeah, totally get it. And I was like, wow, okay.
yes, yes. I think it was actually a rebuke that made me remember the words sabah.
Okay.
I'm actually was getting a bit agitated about something, and this Muslim woman I knew said sabah. And I said, what does that mean? And
Yeah,
yeah, she explained. So
I
I
see.
remember
Yeah.
that.
That's a way for things to be remembered, either something exciting or painful.
Yes, we remember emotionally, I think.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And you had three big questions to ask me, and I thought we could um, perhaps even deal with it in just an hour. Your first question was I should look it up
Shall
now.
I say it?
Yes,
Uh,
please.
Is
I'll let you
science,
say it.
is science a threat to religion? Cool.
And we'll deal with that, and then we'll go to the next one, and hopefully we will.
Yeah.
Okay. I would say that science has nothing at all to say about what we should do for the best, because I think science basically just says what is or isn't, and what can or can't be done with the current state of technology. And scientists have never claimed to be able to detect God with their scientific instrument. So I'm really astounded that anybody is saying that science has anything to say about what we should or shouldn't do. Um, as far as I'm concerned, scientists actually can't even say what caused the Big Bang, but if we are agreed that the universe was created, then theists, I think, have the edge on scientists about who or what created the universe, and theists would, of course, say it was God who created the universe. And scientists will have to remain silent because they, well, what do they know about these things anyway?
Hmm. You see what it is? I think the reason I think this question is important because there's a lot of misunderstanding about the nature of belief. The let's say atheists or anti-religionists, whatever they want to call themselves, they want to believe that belief in God is illogical, and I think that's why this is important because they think the more we learn about science, the more we realize God cannot exist. And that is a massive misunderstanding because it's literally the opposite. The more we realize about the mechanics of, let's say, a leaf, oh, is it just a flappy, wavy green thing? No, it's a solar panel. It's an amazing solar panel. It's organic. It breaks apart and then it just goes into the soil and gets reused and reusable solar panel. You don't have, toxic materials lying around. It's just absolutely amazing when we realize when we learn more about science, that we say this thing must have a creator if we're honest. So that's kind of why I think this question is important. I don't want to just say that they're completely separate. And actually, I don't think they're separate. I mean, just what are your thoughts about that, first of all?
Well, when I had a debate with a Muslim some years ago, I think it was I think it must be about 7 years ago. The he made the point. I was arguing the atheist point, and he was, but his argument, which I remember to this day, was this. This is the chain of logic. He said, if we are here because there was a creation, because we are part of God's creation. Because there was a creation, there must have been a creator, and we Muslims believe that that creator was God.
Right. I mean, that's the most simple piece of logic you can consider in a situation. Like, I'm looking into a webcam right now. I never saw the creator of the webcam, but I just know that it's not random bits of metal. It required intelligence for it to be there. So even though I didn't see the creator, there absolutely had to be a creator of the webcam. And since I'm way more complicated, and since if we understand the mechanics of just our little planet and how water is recycled and 101 things are done to keep our fragile bodies alive,
Mm-hmm.
it's only the most logical and honest thing to say that we have a creator, our planet has a creator, etc. So we don't see the creator, but the evidence of the creator is all around us.
It can be inferred, in other words. It's just that many people choose not to make the inference.
And that's why I talk about honesty. It's like, it seems what we do, or what atheists do, and I'm not hating on atheists. I was an atheist for a while myself, right?
Oh, were
Because
you?
yes, I was brought up. So I was born a Muslim, but I was brought up even by my religious leader, let's say, or leaders, to always question and think.
Mm-hmm.
And so I question, but why we go to atheism, I think, is an interesting thing. It's not necessarily logical. It's often emotional. It's often anger with somebody. Like, if you're angry with a certain person who's religious, then you reject them and you reject everything, and you don't necessarily use logic. But I wouldn't say it was completely illogical as well, because I fell for a trap, a scientific lie, let's say. And the lie goes like this: that sure, things are complicated, the camera's complicated, we're complicated, but given enough time, anything is possible. And I fell for that. Anything is possible. But then you can do some math, and I did a recent video where I talked about, like, let's just do the maths. Like, is anything possible? And there's a word called probability in maths. I'm a math teacher, but I'm not going to get too complicated, hopefully. Okay, it's like, let's say it's 50% chance God exists, 50% chance God doesn't exist. Then we're right to just pick, you know, one way or the other. It doesn't matter. But let's say there's 99% chance God exists and 1% chance God does not exist. Then you're dishonest if you go with a 1% possibility. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and we could do the maths, right? So I did it recently, and I picked something that the arch atheist Richard Dawkins actually picked himself in The Blind Watchmaker.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and he said, hemoglobin, that little red thing that makes up blood, you need 500 million of them just to make a pin drop's worth of blood, right? So we're talking about something really small, okay? And then people be amazed how difficult it is, because to make that just one hemoglobin, so never mind making a pin drop worth of blood, one hemoglobin, and you need 5 million of them just to make pin drops size blood, right? people they say, oh, we appreciate nature, but let me help people appreciate nature. Okay, just simple math is not disputable, and this is something that's picked up by Richard Dawkins himself, right, in his book. And so the way you make hemoglobin, I'm not going to get too complicated, I'm not even an expert, but it's not like particularly debated, is just you have a chain of, I think they're called enzymes now, no, forgot the word, but chain of stuff, right? Okay, but you've got 22 options each time, and you've got to make, there's four chains. If you put chains together, they're 500 long. Okay, so without getting too complicated, you have to do 22 times 22 times 22 times 22 500 times. That number is, just roughly, is something like 10 to the power 750. It's one with 750 zeros. I don't know if I've lost you, but it's a huge
I
number.
think you will have lost most of my viewers.
Okay, right. Thankfully, I was talking to two mathematicians. I talked to random people like I was talking to yourself, and both of them happened to be involved in maths, and maybe that's why it worked. But let's say it's an incredibly big number, so big that, like, 10 to the power, I won't go on too much if I'm, being confusing, but 10 to the power 9 is a billion. So 10 to the power 700, it's so big, it's not within the human mind to be able to understand it. Okay, so the chance of that is, and then you count the number of seconds or in the universe. So that's only 10 to the power 8. Can you imagine? 10 to the power 8 is the number of seconds that the universe has been around for, and 10 to the power 700 is how many possibilities there are in making this thing by accident. And without getting into too much, all you have to do is divide the two numbers together, and you get the chance. If you for every second the universe existed, if you had an attempt at making one of these little red hemoglobin things, okay, the chances of that is 1 divided by roughly 10 to the power 700, which is like basically the probability of this tiny thing being made is, it's basically zero.
Infinitesimal.
Infinitely zero. Like you're right now, the chance of you dying with a plane crashing on your head is trillions and trillions and trillions of times more likely than this one, not even a drop of blood being made. So then you go bigger. You go, the chance of a drop of blood being made is mind-bogglingly basically zero already, and then a human being being made is just impossible.
We could have just evolved.
So that's what I'm saying. Evolution is a bunch of like the probability or the chance of accidents happening. Okay,
Right.
and I said if you attempted an accident every second from the beginning of the universe, and that's not even being fair to the possibility, because hemoglobin had no chance of being created in the beginning of the universe because there weren't the materials ready. Okay, helium, that all the basic materials only came into existence much later on, and to do this sort of organic chemistry, people who are experts on this, the way they do this kind of chemistry, you need freezers, and they need to be in perfect conditions, and if you leave it out for a second too long, the whole thing just gets destroyed. These are not easy things to make. This is not Lego. Yeah, this is really difficult stuff to make. Like, you try to make hemoglobin, you will definitely fail, right? So it's like you try trillions and trillions of times, like from the beginning of the universe till now, and you have zero chance of making it. Just mathematically, probabilities. So that's why I come back to. It's like the probabilities are nothing. There is no chance mathematically. It's not an opinion. Mathematically, it's impossible for life to exist because it's that complicated. And anybody who says they think they appreciate nature and yet they say that it's possible that life could have come into existence by accident, by evolution. I'm not against the idea of evolution itself. That's another confusion. I just think it's guided evolution rather than random evolution. There's a much more to say about why it's a scientific bit of propaganda to tell us that it's possible, and I fell for it myself.
Well, I suppose we can always find, reasons that may sound superficially convincing to say God exists or that he doesn't. But my position is simply this. Even if we're not sure of God's existence, we should obey his laws because the laws in the Quran make sense. And there are, well, utilitarian reasons for obeying God's laws. It will give us a more stable economy, a more stable society, mitigate the atrocities of war if we have to fight them, because there are rules of warfare and international relations in the Quran. And supposing the world were following these laws, I'm not saying there wouldn't be any wars anymore, but they just wouldn't be so terrible, and would be, disputes would be more quickly settled if people truly adhere to a rules-based system and were
Yes,
good
and I think
people.
yeah, and that's actually there are many ways of finding the evidence of God. In a way, what you're saying is evidence of God. These rules that works so well, and if we try anything else it works so badly, and we can see working so badly. We can see the experiment, the Western society, and etc., and we can see it collapsing, people trying whatever they want to except for Islam, and the only thing that seems to be working is Islam, um, or has worked in the past. So I mean that's a whole discussion, but we seem to be agreeing on that anyway. But yeah, that's a sort of evidence of God anyway. But you do need to have, I believe, I think, some sort of conviction, um, that these ideas are from God. Because then you could, if you don't have that, you always have these doubts. It's like, oh, isn't there a better way? And maybe that's not so bad to think that there's a better way. But one of the reasons why the rules of Islam work so well is because it's not just at the highest level that they work. Society crumbles if it doesn't work from the root, which is yourself. So it's only really works when you've got peace inside, and then you're able to form a family, then you're able to form society, and then you're able to form a stable country. When you don't have that, it's as I love the way Andrew Tate explains things. It's broken all the way up. It doesn't work unless it's stable right from the center.
Yes, because I think if you really believed in it, then you're more likely to obey these laws for longer. And but if you didn't, if you were just obeying in order to avoid punishment, then you might disobey it. When you think nobody was looking, I'll get away with murder, theft, and rape, and if nobody sees me. And therefore, belief in God is permitting a policeman to come into your mind to, well, regulate your actions, and and people can
But
be
is anything?
persuaded. People can be
But
persuaded to believe in God, couldn't they? I mean,
yeah, the
even
thing
people
is,
who are reluctant to believe in it, the benefits are undeniable. Um,
yes.
if you can say, I mean, I think Jews are very useful as a kind of mechanical rabbit in a dog track, if you will, because a lot of
What are
Gentile
you for, Jews? What?
Jews, I'll explain.
Oh, I thought you said that, but I was like, okay, I'm trying to, yeah.
Well, because
Jews are useful. That's an interesting
well,
phrase. I know.
because they claim to be God's chosen people, and of
Right.
course, if you accept that, then you think, well, chose you to do what, and
Yeah, I get that. I
and then
think,
the
yeah.
answer would be, well, what chose us to show Gentiles the evils of idolatry, and then it becomes clear, because they are these people who aren't supposed to have an idol, and who are supposed to be triggered by idolatry, and go on about it, and I think the argument has been made that Jews are actually evidence of God, because they have the most restrictive religion, and apparently everybody hates them and wants to exterminate them, but they're still around. So God
Mm,
must be protecting them.
yeah.
And and then the next question
I
falls to
think
be,
just the ideas work so well that they do well. But then at the same time, there's a lot of Jews who are atheists, and the number of Orthodox Jews, I feel like they're very tiny, even reducing in number all the time. I've got great Jewish friends, but even the ones who dress up with the, very Jewish kind of attire, they can be that some don't even believe in Judaism, but it just works so well because they make money within the community that they just stay wearing the kit, as it were.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, apparently in Israel, they're in some trouble, because it seems half the Jews in Israel are secular and the other religious, and there seems to be some kind of disagreement about which God they want to worship, and the liberal Democrat Jews want to worship the God of, I would say, the false idol of liberal democracy, and the other lot are having a think about it. It
What is the
seems
fourth idol of liberal democracy?
the false idol. I suppose I'm not a Democrat, and I'm saying that it has basically
Oh,
caused like
democracy is the idol, you mean?
false false
Oh, the
idol
false idol. Sorry, I thought there was just
I think
something. No, no, it's just I thought you were saying something really complicated that I should know.
uh,
Yes. Okay. Yeah. That democracy fixes everything by itself magically. Is
well,
that
it's
the
become a
idea?
religion in the West, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. Like freedom is the religion in the West. Like freedom is the most important thing, and they forget about responsibility, which is the actual thing that makes societies function.
well, yes, I think the problem with Jews is that they I'm sure if I were Jewish, it would be great to have all the privileges of being a Jew without the responsibility of practicing as a Jew, which is very restrictive and more restrictive.
But it doesn't work. You see, the people I know, as soon as this is the thing, you were talking about policing. You don't, you in theory, you could police people into behaving correctly, but they can't because the magic of Islam works at the most subtle levels. It starts with inner peace, and you can't police inner peace. Okay, and when you have inner peace, then you're kind to your neighbors and you go out of your way, and there's no immediate benefit to being kind to your neighbors, but only when you behave like that and your like circles of love, as it were, increase, only then does a society function. Those things can't be policed. Do you get it? And I see in Judaism, the people who are not so practicing, they don't get married. There are plenty of problems within Judaism as well. It's only the ultra orthodox Jews who really believe in it, when only then does it work. So you've got to. So just to get back to the idea, like you absolutely have to be convinced of God for it to work. Otherwise, you're wavering and it doesn't work. Even with Muslims as well, by the way. Um, I know, I've got relatives, friends, whatever, and I can see the people who really believe, that's who it benefits. And the people who half-half benefit, they half-half get the benefit. I mean, sorry, the people who half-half believe, but it doesn't show in their actions, they only half benefit as well. So the more your conviction of the reality of God, because I don't call it belief God, like God exists whether you accept it or not. It's like the greater your level of conviction or realization of God, the greater you benefit from it.
Yes, I suppose for me, I'm an agnostic, but I think, okay, I am conducting really a thought experiment. I'm just going to act as if I believe. And, if it works, then perhaps God exists.
Hmm.
But I think if you don't want something, um, what I'm trying to say, I suppose, if okay, I have the system of rules called secular Quranism. It is based on the Quran, and people often ask me, "Are you Muslim?" And I say no. But I have to slide into thinking like a Muslim in a way. To make me continue to do it because I know how hated my proposal is in a country whose people are overwhelmingly Islamophobes. So I'm often told, well, why don't you change its name? Why don't you pretend that you wrote it? You know, but of course it's impossible, and and because they
It'd be
know.
hard to hide where your ideas are coming from.
Yes, yes, and pretend
Yeah,
that all these ideas, but I'd be found out,
yeah,
immediately, and most
yeah,
people would, who follow me would already know, and
yeah.
um, and also I need a higher authority. It can't just be, oh, Claire thinks we should be doing A, B, and C. It's like, oh, and God agrees with Claire because it's in the Quran. What I support is in the Muslim holy book, and I just see the logic of invoking a higher authority, and I know nobody's going to listen
My
to
only
little
worry
old
is
me.
that My only worry is that you sound a bit like Jordan Peterson, who says he acts like God exists. But my problem with Jordan Peterson, although he says a lot of smart things, he suffers from a lot of depression, and his family suffers from a ton of depression. And like when you only act and are not convinced of it, and I don't think he's convinced of Christianity. I think he's just an older person hanging on to what he's more comfortable or used to. As older people do. It's
Yes,
hard to
but
change.
yes,
But
boomers.
his
I mean, he's been.
position is not convincing of that way of acting. Like acting if God exists is not as powerful as knowing God exists and then acting.
Yes. Yes, he was asked a few times if he was Christian, and he refused to answer. So that's
Hmm.
quite telling.
Hmm.
Um, yes, and he does say really quite extraordinarily foolish things like, I don't know how I can be a Jew, a Christian, and a Muslim, and it's like you're not supposed to be those three things at the same time, and of course it's impossible, and there's no need to do this thing. Did you remember when he was
I
asking
think he
Hamza
might
Yusuf, I think?
I think he does say some silly things because he's resisting learning about Islam. So recently he said something like, "I don't believe in your Allah," okay, and it's like, do you know that that's the word Jesus used for God? Like he really doesn't know much. And I think he's resisting because then you'd have to become a Muslim, and that's too scary
And
for
he
him.
would alienate his sort of white nationalist fan base.
Maybe. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. Because he does. Yeah. Yeah. I think he can be bought. He seems to have been bought recently by
Yes,
Daily Wire and
right.
some Jewish groups. But I'm not against any Jews. I love Jews. I'm just saying there are Zionists and there are Jews, and I think he's been bought. But um,
Oh,
and
did you
yeah,
listen to Mohammed Hijab and him talking about
yeah,
Islam? I mean, I
yes.
thought it was very telling because, in the end, Muhammad Hijab said, well, what do you think of Islam? Because obviously Islam
What
is
he
more
said was
easier to believe. That was what he was
he.
saying. Do
Well, what he said, as far as I remember, because I went through it a couple of times, he said Muhammad Hijab said, "Is there?" In short, he said, because Muhammad Hijab makes simple things sound complicated. He said, "Is there a logical? If I gave you a logical reason, and Muhammad Hijab said probabilistic something or other, and
yes,
some big
yes,
words,
that was the word he
but."
used.
Yeah, exactly. Just if I gave you a logical reason, would you accept Islam? And Jordan Peterson said no. And I thought, okay, everything you say, Jordan Peterson, is based on logic, but when it comes to believing in Islam, no. Okay, and then yeah, so fair enough.
But
I
his
don't.
reason was clear towards the end. He was saying, "Well, you're such peasants. I don't want to have your religion," because this was what Daniel Hakikachi was saying later. Because the implication is that your religion might be all right, but I still think you're peasants, and I'm not going to take your religion. And Daniel Hakikachi was saying, "Well, you should take our religion, even though we are peasants." So I thought that.
Okay, interesting. I don't remember quite that, but I do get the sense that he's got a habit of saying things like, what's that famous silly phrase? Judeo-Christian culture or whatever the word is.
Values, maybe.
It's values, which is
Heritage.
ridiculous. Yeah, because it's ridiculous. Because if it's Judeo and Christian, then it's Muslim as well, because they're so intertwined. But it's ridiculous. But anyway, I don't want to ruin your live stream. Are we going to still hit all the three, or are we just?
We can do it. I think it's you up to you basically, because I like to think that if we don't finish discussing all we want to discuss, you will come back again, so there'll be
Sure.
another time, and I'm happy to let the conversation flow naturally, because then it's kind of logical, one subject to another, and I'm not going to be prescriptive.
Okay, cool. Yeah. What am I? Any other thoughts? Is science a threat to religion? The things I wanted to say was that I don't believe that they're separate, really, because I think, and I like to be as difficult as possible. Just because you said that you consider them separate, I'll disagree partly for that reason. But it's I do. So, how does science come to Europe? Islam. I think it's quite well known. Well, I'm not sure how well it's known, but the Enlightenment would not have happened if it wasn't for Islam. I don't know what your opinion on that is.
Um, I thought the Enlightenment was a natural reaction against the horrors of the wars of the Reformation.
Okay. So, what is known as the Dark Ages is actually when science was blooming right across the Arab world, right? So it's just very biased telling of history. And so for ages, there was Christian Europe, where their idea of medicine was just wizardry. They're more likely to kill you. And this is just there's a great BBC documentary about when the Moors ruled Europe, Moors, Moors, which is just a secret name for Muslims. And so they were more likely to kill you than save you with their medicine, Christian medicine. On the other hand, there were there were street lights, there were medicine that were used for hundreds of years after Islamic Spain. Do you know Andalusia, like Islamic Spain?
I
Yeah.
visited the Alhambra and was very
Uh-huh.
impressed.
Right, I haven't, but it's good. I've read about them. One day I will. So there was so much science; it was mind-boggling. It was like at points in time, it was hundreds of years ahead of the rest of Europe, and that's a crazy thing to say. When you look at Japan, you say, "Oh, it's like maybe 10 years ahead." Okay, but like just the crazy differences. To say that it was just a natural reaction to what did you say it was? A natural reaction to what?
Reaction against the wars of the Reformation, because well, it really wasn't about religion, it was about politics, wasn't
Right.
it? And basically, the kings having enough of the Pope telling them what to do. Is my understanding of the wars of the Reformation, because when the European kings accepted the bargain, or I should say the corrupt bargain of Christianity. They were barbarian kings who were illiterate, and it sounded a good deal. The people from the Eternal City, who ran the religion of Rome, saying, we can do you a deal. We'll help you run your kingdom better, and in return you will give us the souls of your subjects. And that was basically what it was. There was no freedom of belief in Europe, because if you were the subject of an absolute monarch, then you had to follow his religion.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, you could have, let's say, I don't mind people have sort of competing theories of how the Enlightenment happened, but I would like to say that you've got all these basic building blocks of what made all the science possible: the algebra, the algorithms, the great new ideas in chemistry and everything, all those amazing things on your doorstep in Spain. And as soon as Islamic Spain collapses because of their own corruption in Islamic Spain, that knowledge seemed to come across. So you can say it was caused by some other things, or it could be all that science and mathematics on their doorstep, and they just had to take it. And it was, you could check the timelines, and you can say,
yes, I understand that Arabs preserved documents from ancient Greece and ancient Rome, and translated them, and put them in
added a
libraries.
ton on top of that as well.
And had universities in Cordoba and all those places.
Yeah, Morocco. Yeah, the first university was made, I think, in Morocco by a lady. I think her name was Khadija. So the first university ever to be created was made by a Muslim woman, hundreds of years before Oxford or Cambridge. In fact, was it Oxford or Cambridge? I think Cambridge was the first university in England, was made by a monk who learnt about universities in Islamic Spain. So it's hard to believe otherwise that the Enlightenment, I don't think that people debate it that much, that the Enlightenment was actually caused by Muslims. But anyway, yeah. So anyway, I mean, the point is that, is science a threat to religion? Not at all. It's like science came to Europe through the religion of Islam, and then there's no contradiction between science and religion. I'm not sure if I talked about the many miraculous ideas in the Quran, for example, like the universe was a closed up mass and then it expanded. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh yes, the Big Bang was described in the Quran.
Right, and there's so many more things. You just go, there's a massive, endless list, and there's more cropping up all the time. There was one, and I did a rough check on this. It says the number of times the word land has been mentioned versus the number of times the word water has been mentioned. The exact ratio represents the amount of land versus water on planet Earth. So this kind of sounds like, oh, maybe it's just made up. But then you can check it up, and there's Wikipedias where they mention every single time. You can check it up for yourself. The Quran's online, and there's Wikipedia where it says, here's this reference for, so this mention of the word land here, mention of the land here, mention of land here, etc., etc. So it's quite fairly easy to check. I asked a student of mine just before this lesson, I teach online, I said, what do you think about this? You're not religious, and if the Quran mentions this and it mentions that, what do you think? And he just said, I don't know. And sometimes I think, what is enough evidence? And this is a good question for yourself, because I don't think it's healthy being agnostic. I think it's great that you've realized the power of Islam, but I think it's far more powerful in terms of inner happiness and implementation of Islam when you're convinced of God. So what would be enough evidence for God to exist. I'm not sure if this is in the remit of the question, is science a threat to religion? But I sometimes think people are hold too tightly onto the idea that God does not exist. So what would be enough evidence
What would be enough evidence for me
of
to
God?
change my
Yeah,
mind? Um,
yeah,
I suppose the success of my little project to persuade um, Western governments that Christo-liberalism is kaput and they should have a better moral system other than the one they currently have.
yeah.
My little project is to convince the Americans who don't have an official religion that it is time for them to get one. Otherwise, their unofficial religion will be the one of pursuit of happiness at the expense of everyone else and each other, which is why they are at sixes and sevens currently.
But why would that be evidence? Because there's going to be corrupt people at the top, and if they eventually accept, why would that be evidence of God or not? I don't understand the connection.
Well, I suppose many people have told me that my project would be so would have such an zero possibility of success. So,
Hmm.
if I could succeed, then I must thank
God.
someone
Yeah.
more powerful than myself. And
Okay. Yeah. I see that in the sense that so what my belief in God is multifaceted. It's kind of logical, but it's also through experience. Um, and so I think, in the same way, if you try something earnestly with good intention, but also being interested in knowing God, you will start seeing God's like hand helping you. I'm sure of it. I see it all the time. Loads of Muslims see it all the time. God has one rule in the Quran. So if you want to effectively see me, as it were, see me in action, and everybody gets the opportunity whether they want it or not, because God wants everybody to be helped. But He says, if you are willing to listen to me, then I will answer your prayers, and I'll, guide you. I can't remember the exact words.
mhm.
So that's the promise of God, and yeah. So I think that could be your evidence. Everybody comes to God in different ways. So maybe that's the way. Yeah. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think if you do believe in God, you're supposed to have a continuing relationship with Him, and this means internal dialogues about, well, should I do this or shouldn't I? What will be the consequences? But mostly it is, I want stuff, give it to me, God, and then the immediate question would be, well, why should I? Why should I? Why should have I done anything to deserve it? And I guess if you've been a good boy or a good girl, you'll think, well, I've been a good person, therefore I deserve this thing that I'm asking you for. And I suppose if you think, well, I've been a naughty boy or a naughty girl, then I must promise to do better, and then you do better, and then you ask again. I imagine those would be the logical thought processes of somebody bargaining with God and asking
I
Him for
don't.
stuff.
Yeah. So this verse of the Holy Quran, it doesn't paint that picture. It's a very different way around. It says, God says, I'm the boss. First of all, understand that, okay? And then I'm not your pet that you click your fingers and I do things for you, because that's not the relationship between the
No,
creator.
he's not a genie in a lamp.
Right, but it's not a pet either, and it's not your God is not your slave either. And so I'm trying to find the verse of the Holy Quran because I think the words of God are so powerful. But because I just did a not Google search, but search on my. Anyway,
Mm.
never mind. It goes. It's the deal is that I promise to help you because God wants to help you. God absolutely wants you to do well. God doesn't need, first of all, for you to worship Him or accept God. It's 100% for the creation's benefit. So God makes this deal. Says, listen, you listen to me. Whether you intend to listen to me, then I will show you that I exist. That's the paraphrased version. I will answer your prayers and I will guide you through life. And it's not really a bargain in that sense. It's like when um, it's just God trying to help you out. It's like, I need God, and when you have the better intentions, what you ask for, hopefully better as well. It's not, I want this expensive car, because then you're not really listening to God. Do you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? God wants you to be a good person, not be in a rubbish car for no reason. A good car could be useful for some
Mm-hmm.
reason, but you shouldn't just be a person who's just begging for more and more materialistic things. Is not on the path to God anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I have endless. My experience with God is the more. This is the way. Maybe this is the understanding. This saying of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He said that if you take one step towards God, God will take 10 steps towards you. Ever heard of this one? Or um, if you walk towards God, God will run towards you. Now, this is definitely not physical because God is everywhere. But the idea is the more you sacrifice for God, the more God, 10 times more, 100 times more, would help you. And that's my experience. And I started from an atheist and kind of resisting God, being annoyed with God as well. Like, God, why are you doing this for me? Why isn't this working? And the more I let go and more I did things for God, the more God controlled, and just incredible things would all just happen all the time. Just like it's a daily part of my routine, to the extent that I just begin to feel everything is happening because God wanted me good. God wanted it to be a certain way. Now, it's not really evidence for you, but I think because my personal experience is not going to be evidence for you, because you can say, oh, maybe it's in your mind, maybe this, and you haven't gone through all my experiences. That's why you need to go through it personally.
I find it a very good way. This bargaining thing that I know you don't quite approve of is really, well, if you're bargaining with God, then, or even asking Him for things, you would take care to say what it is you want. Really, I think there's this thing you want, and you want to. How are you going to get it? And and just by focusing on that, maybe gives you the motivation. It becomes clearer in your mind what it is you want, and that might in turn, focus and motivate you. Even if God doesn't exist, it is therapeutic in the process of articulating what it is you want and why you want it. Because when you ask
Yeah.
for something, you have to say why you deserve it.
So
Um,
my experience of people who bargain with God is they don't hold up their end of the bargain. They get it, and then these are the people I know, and then they go carry on doing their
no,
own
no
thing.
prayers of thanks and of acknowledgement.
A
No
little
thank you
bit, but they
letter.
make a deal. I've heard lots of deals. I will do this if you do this for me, and then they don't hold up their end of the argument. But God doesn't mind. God got plenty. He doesn't make a difference. But he said, "Look, I held up. You remember what happened, and I'll meet you at the end of this life."
Or it could be said that if the omnipotent, omniscient, and perfectly moral God exists, then he's quite capable of creating a universe in which the sin is its own punishment. So even
It is.
without intervention from God, this thing that He told you not to do that you decide to do anyway is gonna, well, hurt you.
Okay, so because I think I agree, I'm not sure, to some extent. Are you saying if you have a sin, you don't have to wait till the end of life to experience the punishment? Is that what you're saying? Yes, I 100%
Yes,
agree. In fact, what God says in the Quran says everything that I've said is called a sin is bad for you. So it is bad for you anyway. It's like, don't eat this thing. It's bad for you because I know I made the stuff. Yeah, don't eat pork. It's bad for you. And then science has revealed that, you know, pigs have a very fast digestive, very short digestive process, which means the toxins remain in the meat. So it's bad
yes,
for you. Yeah,
and it's
this
full of
that kind of thing.
parasites. The meat is
Right,
full of, if you don't
exactly.
cook it
Very
properly.
right. So yeah. So there is, you can call it, God is nature. You can say, if you want to, you can say God is nature and God created nature. So um, there are natural repercussions for not following God's natural law, if you want to put it that way. And you will suffer, and that's why Islam is so popular, by the way, because people can see, like, Islam says this: you don't do it, you lose right now, or in 10 years time, maybe, because God is kind and lets you think, or let you make 10 years of mistake before you realize the result. But you get micro feedback as well. I think God is kind in that way as well.
Yes, yes. Thank you for talking about God being kind and tolerant and basically letting you, take all the rope that you might need to hang yourself. And I suppose it made me think of Christianity, because the next question that well, Christians might ask is, well, if God doesn't approve of idolatry, why did He enable the rise of 3 global Christian empires? And I thought, well, it could be, well, He's giving you the rope, because now that you run out of steam, well, if you are going to correct yourself, what are you going to correct yourself with? You know, the I word that they hate and fear looms over them. How are they going to correct themselves other than to say, well, Christianity was wrong because it was idolatry, and I would argue that the concept of idolatry means that you pay the opportunity cost of not being rightly guided by the Quran.
Yeah, yeah. So I think there are a lot of different ways you can look at something. You can say, you can call it idolatry, or different aspects of Christianity, which just don't make sense. Like 3 = 1, nobody gets that, right? So, yeah, I suppose I could say there's so many obvious faults in the doctrine of Christianity. There are some good things as well. I did a video this weekend where I said I approach different Christians, and this is a really scary question. You were there. Say, how much of the Bible do you follow? And this is like the first person I asked just ran. It's like, no, I'm not going to answer this question, even though he's inviting everybody to Christianity. So I think they know themselves. I think it's self-evident, whether you say idolatry is bad or any other part of the teaching, is self-evident to these Christians that their religion is false, but they just stick to it. It's called the ego.
Yes, and I would argue that they have made an idol of their Islamophobia, and their feelings of hatred prevent them from choosing the obvious solution and submitting to correction.
Cool. Yeah, yeah. I don't know why, but I'm eager to. Because I feel bad but you said you're going to go with the flow. Are we? I think we're already talking about, can organized religion fix our broken society in some
Yes,
ways?
we are.
Or is
It flowed naturally, didn't
it?
it?
So, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. What the
And we
reason why?
settled the question already, haven't we?
I suppose, yeah. I've said what I think about science in that
Oh,
respect.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
This little thing. It's like, yes, physical laws. There are immediate consequences, and you could say, well, God also made the laws of physics, as well as giving us His commandments. But the harm of breaking His moral laws, it doesn't happen immediately, but it will catch up with us eventually, and we've also just discussed that. It's just a bit slower, because it's waiting for God is waiting for us to, well, a connect cause with effect.
Right. It gives us 100 chances. We know each time there's something wrong. Even the idea of a conscience is an evidence in the Quran of the Day of Judgment. So we have this niggling feeling. and psychologists have basically accepted that there's a thing called a conscience. So we every time we do something wrong, we go, oh, I feel bad about that, but I'm going to continue because nobody else can see how bad I feel about it. I'm going to continue my bad thing because in the short term, I think I might get something out of it. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So there's always a niggling feeling behind in the back of our minds. There's Viktor Frankl. I mentioned him, I think, when we talked the other day.
Oh, the
Some
psychologist.
the psychologist, right? And he says basically, um, you have to live a life of meaning to be happy, and it has to be something good. And what is something good? Well, you can test it through your conscience. Is that good? Is that the right thing to do? And only then can you be happy. So there are all these. There's the laws of physics. There's the laws of like biology. If I eat the pork, or if I don't know, do something else that God doesn't want, or even the laws of psychology, whatever, they're all in play telling you which
Mm.
direction to go. And the answer is Islam.
Yes. I don't know if you've heard of, you mentioned meaning, and there's been talk in some certain circles of the meaning crisis. Have you heard of that term? I think it's a
The
Jordan.
meaning crisis.
Yes. Do,
I mean, it makes sense. There is a meaning crisis, because as soon as you say there is no God, then you're saying this whole universe is random, and there cannot be any meaning or purpose if it's all random. If it's all just an accident, it's not illogical. You cannot. Yeah, so you're going to have a meaning crisis, and why a crisis is because you need meaning to be happy, and you're going to have a crisis. You're going to have a personal crisis if you don't have meaning. So that makes sense to me that there is a meaning crisis.
yes, I think it's John Vervaeke's thing. I don't know if you've heard of him.
No,
Uh,
I'll read it up.
Yes, I mean, John Vervaeke and Jordan Peterson, they seem to, see a lot of each other, and deal with the same issues that it seems to me trouble men. I mean, I interpret the meaning crisis, is really the one for men who, maybe want to.
So you're saying women don't suffer from meaning crisis?
Um, Yes, they do, but I suppose if men don't know who they are, as it seems they don't, because they seem to want to become women, then there's something more fundamental about their ability to do what they're supposed to do. Because if we don't know who we are, then we won't be doing what we're supposed to be doing, and we will get even worse results. And I suppose that the whole idea of society is that we all have our assigned roles. We are, in this class, we're in the other class, but we, high or low, we're supposed to
Well, I was
work
thinking of
together. And,
it's not gender roles.
mm,
Yeah, because we are different. Men and women are different, and therefore, just like different cogs have a different function, if you're biologically different, then you have a biologically slightly different role. And it makes sense. If you accept nature is exceptionally well designed, then it makes sense that if you are the one having a baby, you're probably best suited taking care of the baby, etc. So things like gender roles, yeah. So and that's only religion, especially Islam, that are sticking to those gender roles, and nobody else is not. And then you can see the collapse of families, collapse of society, etc.
yes, and I think the normalization of extramarital sex has made marriage more or less irrelevant, and I think gender roles are of particular importance to people looking for a spouse, because if you're looking for a wife, you will think, well, I would like her to be, if you're sensible, a good wife, a good mother, and not the clubbing, partying type, and a woman would say, well, I'd like him to be a good provider and a good protector, and in this way, our marriageability would depend on our gender, and there's something wrong with us if our gender roles is not in harmony with our sex organs. If you're male, but you want to be female, or vice versa, then something is terribly wrong, and perhaps it should be treated as mental illness rather than encouraged, propagated, and normalized, which is what our government is doing.
Right, yeah. And it's only when you have religion which has in black and white, because they literally put this in writing, what is right and what is wrong. And that's what the Quran says. We have made clear to you what is right and wrong, and not just told you, but logically explained to you why this is right and wrong. Only then can you decide if you're having a mental health issue or not. Otherwise, you don't know what's right and wrong, and then you could be having sex with a cat and nobody could tell you you're wrong because it could be by that time normalized. Like, I don't know what else is normalized at the moment.
Yes, I mean, it's just to prevent us from making mistakes that many people must have made centuries ago. If you go, well, if you're determined to be atheist, you'll be saying, all these laws, they were cooked up by people, very clever people who want to control us and make us do this rather than have fun. And obviously these people know that, if you don't support marriage, then your society will collapse. And what the five world religions, what they have in common is their support of marriage. Because, if you don't marry each other before you have children, then you're going to be terrible parents. And if you're terrible parents, you will suffer from degeneracy and low birth rates and, people not fit to become the employees of the future and be complaining about illegal immigration because I guess business organisations will want cheaper and more willing labour and change the quality of your society, which there seems to be an operating issue for the dissident right of our times. They don't like immigration, but they don't seem to have made the connection between the uncompetitiveness of white proletarian labour that makes their governments keep wanting to import. It's not just manual labour, but
Technical
computer
know.
programmers,
Yeah, exactly.
doctors.
Yeah.
They don't seem to be able to produce people capable of doing these things anymore because of the ever-lowering standards of education caused by, I would suggest, the badly parented children of unmarried mothers bringing their children up in fatherless homes.
Right. Yes. That. I mean, the lack of rules, the lack of direction. But I would say even if you're a deeply unhappy person, which is what you're going to be most likely if your parents don't even like each other and they don't care enough about each other to stay just for your sake even, okay, there's a good chance you're deeply happy, and I think the statistics show that. I think you already mentioned the delinquency and criminal behavior, etc. So many bad things related to single parent households, and again, not hating on the single moms themselves, just feeling sorry for them. You need peace, you need direction, you need a reason, you need a purpose. Only then can you be really productive. And so what you lack, I think you said a meaning crisis and everything else crisis in the West. You're not going to produce the programmers, the hard workers, the motivated workers, and yes, then you're going to have to import. What was the word?
Import.
Yeah.
Foreigners from abroad who will upset the locals, and unfortunately, these anti-immigration parties are so dishonest that they don't actually tell these people, like, well, if you want to stop immigration, you'll have to care about things like education and grammar schools and stuff that you people don't care about because you're not parents. You see, I mean, I think the reason why the transgender stuff is being rolled out so easily is because most parents are not married parents, and the unmarried mother doesn't really care about what kind of stuff is being taught to their children. I mean,
Right.
I'd like to imagine that if she was living with a father and they were in a loving relationship and they both loved the kid, they would fight a damn sight harder to question the LGBT thing being rolled out in schools, and to the credit of Muslims, they have been the ones most effective in challenging this
Mhm.
on both sides of the Atlantic.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, as I say, until your right has been distinguished from wrong, as the Quran says, you're lost. You would accept everything. If you've got no direction, somebody else is going to give you direction. So if you don't know, if you have no direction or you know goals in life or something, and then somebody says LGBT, great stuff, then you say sure, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, or they can't
You
see the harm of it.
You
It
can't see the harm of it. It's the same with sort of adverts. Like if you have a clear direction in life, and you know what's good for you and what's bad for you, then the adverts don't work for you. But do you know what I mean? Like I don't feel the desperate need to buy an incredibly expensive car because I know what really makes me happy. So you need to be clear about that. You need this book of guidance that clearly explains to you what's good for you and what's bad for you, what's right and what's wrong. If you don't have that, you will absorb every piece of crap that comes your way through adverts, through uh, psychopathic politicians, whatever, however they
yeah.
want to destroy the planet. Yeah.
Because I think if you don't believe in God, then by default your appetites and your opinions and your moods will be your idols, and you will be guided by them, and that will make you very easy to control. It will be easy to bribe you or threaten you and entice you and distract you, because you'll do whatever seems fun at the time.
Yes. In fact, the Quran says that if you are a disbeliever, and a disbeliever, and the words in Arabic are so deep, it's not just a dismissive word. It means somebody who hides from the light or guidance of God. So you literally have to hide, run from the obvious, as it were. Um, then you, the verse of the Quran says, will be like a thirsty person chasing a mirage in the desert, which is a beautiful description of pretty much every addiction. Okay, because what is addiction? The belief or the feeling that once you get that thing that you don't have, the iPhone 101 or something, whatever model people are on at the moment, you know, um, then you'll be happy. But then the Quran and why the word mirage is because I don't know if it's obvious or not, but a mirage is a perfect metaphor for the illusion that works in addiction, which is you think that thing in the distance will make you happy, will quench your thirst, the thing that you never seem to feel. But when you finally get there, as with a mirage, it disappears. I don't know. Does that make any sense?
Yes, I think so. What you said made me think about this documentary I saw about shopaholics, and so these shopaholics buy, you know, the same item, but and they don't even use a lot of what they buy, because obviously there's some pleasure they get out of acquiring something, but even though they have no use for it, because they don't open it, they don't use it, so there's some need in their minds about when they buy things that they don't need, I guess.
They're constantly just chasing anything that might satiate their sadness, because that's what it is, their depression. They're just chasing and chasing. And the reason I brought this up, because you said something interesting, that um, these people who are not believing in God, they will fall prey for every um, silly idea that's put in front of them, and partly because an addict is not able to think. They're constantly missing something. They're like a heroin addict. You could you could tell the heroin addict, you should go that way, and they'll say, yeah, sure, because they're so overwhelmed with their addiction for heroin that they can't think. And that's the average person. They can't think. They're overwhelmed with, say, materialism, the endless chase for something and that never fulfills. So they're easy to manipulate. They're easy to manipulate to get more materialistic things that they don't need, but they're also easy to manipulate because they're not in their full control of their senses, because they're simply addicts of one thing or the other. They're easy. They don't have the full capacity of self-control, that they are easy to direct in any direction the elite want.
Yes. And they're not encouraged by the elites to question themselves. I mean, what do you think of this mindfulness thing that they're so keen to push out on children and whatever?
Right. So it's kind of a trick. And what's the trick? So I say that modern Buddhism has been hijacked by Westerners. And one of the and so this is a sort of Buddhism, but it's not better. Sorry, let me correct that, because Buddhism is miles away from what most Westerners see as actual Buddhism. What I mean by that is just a simple example, and I'll get back to the sort of mindfulness and what I think about it. If you see any quote with a picture of Buddha making a pose, right? That quote won't be from Buddha. That will be from a Westerner, and it will sound really good. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so first of all, what you see as Buddhism in the West is not Buddhism, because anything that comes from Buddha is so complicated it just won't be popular. If you read a quote from Buddha, it's just so uncomfortably. I don't know. What's your? Are you aware? Have you noticed that, or do you agree or disagree?
Um, I come from a Buddhist background myself, so
Right.
and I know people who can sort of recite, the five noble paths and the eightfold way and all that. And the thing is, yes, you can remember it word for word, but are you able to actually apply them? And I think the answer is, for most people, no. They will just still be the slaves of their emotion and their appetites and their moods, and they'll
Mm.
forget
I'm
all
not
these
even sure.
principles.
Are these 8 methods? Are they? I came across these 8 methods or 8 ways of doing things. Can't remember the word, but I'm not even sure if that's quite Buddha or it's been synthesized in some way from Buddha. But it doesn't sound like anything from what I've read of Buddha. Um, um, And generally, just to summarize what I think of this mindfulness business, it's nice. It's a nice idea to take time out, but really, what's surrounding it, the ecosystem of ideas around it, is pure selfishness, and that's why it's popular. It's basically about taking care of number one and think in the now. If that kind of idea, just think in the now, don't worry about the future, don't worry about the past, that's actually that's just a very selfish idea, and society will collapse if you just think about yourself. Religion, Islam, Judaism, whatever, Christianity, it's all about learning from your mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
repenting,
Mm-hmm.
taking care of everybody in society. This mindfulness is a very selfish philosophy, but it doesn't look selfish because you just you're not seemingly harming anybody, but actually just taking care of number one all the time and not caring about the future, not caring about your mistakes. And that's the same reason why atheism is so dangerous. It looks like you're not harming anybody, but you're just taking care of number one all the time. Everybody else doesn't matter. So it's the same sort of philosophy. I mean, as a Buddhist, did you know that Buddha believed in a god?
I was informed that Buddhism is an atheist philosophy, and
So
that
that's completely wrong. I
reincarnation
mean,
just sort of happens,
yeah,
without a directing intelligence.
right. Where
and
did
and
you
this
get
is what
your
makes me think that it
Buddhism
hasn't got
from?
the
I'm
complete
intrigued
answer.
because I spoke to a Buddhist monk. I researched it. God is definitely Buddhists definitely believe in God. It's definitely not atheistic.
Yes, I suppose it is a bit confused, and if you ask the Buddhists, well, do you believe in the Abrahamic God? They'll look a bit confused, and I
No, but
guess
a God, not Abrahamic religions or anything, just belief in a God. So I used to do a live stream. I mean, this is just one way of checking, but you can check your own, you can do some research on the origins of Buddhism. And he said, yeah, one mistake people have is they think that Buddhists don't believe in God, but we certainly do believe in God.
right.
Yeah.
I know Buddhists believe in reincarnation, but I think people, whether they do it or not, they will be talking about God. In fact, atheists, in a way, by even by talking about, oh, the best case scenario in an ideal world, I think they are, even then subconsciously reaching out to God, when they think of a better situation than what is currently possible.
Yes, because they do also mantras calling out to the universe, hoping there will be an answer. So that's effectively calling out to God, because you're not saying a rock is God, you're thinking there's a power out there that they don't want to name.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Mm.
Anything they just can't use the word God because it would be very unpopular in the West. So
Yes.
how it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so my idea of mindfulness is it seems sort of harsh on something that seems to be so sort of benign or not dangerous, but it's actually incredibly dangerous, just as atheism is incredibly dangerous, although it doesn't look dangerous on the surface. You
Yes.
know, it's a very selfish, take care of number one mentality, and it doesn't really, I don't think it really works. Supposedly, there's some statistics to say that, when prisoners take time to meditate, they're less violent, and that doesn't sort of surprise me. It's just like you calm down for a minute. Do you know what I mean? You thought about maybe your universe and your place in the universe. Some contemplation will calm you down, possibly. Um, yeah, and it's sort of yeah, especially if you're not having enough sleep or things like that. I would say it's not too different to just sleeping because well, I don't know about your when you try to meditate. It's very hard. I don't like even the style of Buddhist meditation, or let's say mindfulness, general meditation, where you have to stop your mind from working. I think that's a really bad idea. Your mind is designed
Yeah.
to work,
Yes.
yeah, and to stay in a pose for half an hour, not thinking of anything, that doesn't make sense. That's
Or
completely
just
different.
repeating your mantra in your own head. That you, but really, why not? Always be thinking. And what struck me about Buddhism is this idea of, well, if you say all desire is suffering, then are you just telling people to think of themselves as already dead in order to not have any desire? Surely the thing would be to regulate our desire for status and resources or whatever, and a rule-based system, a more detailed rule-based system would help us more. But as you are a maths teacher, I'm suddenly reminded of lowest common denominator and highest common factor, and I'm basically saying those who believe in God would be going for the highest common factor, and those who don't will just instinctively go for the lowest common denominator, and do as well or as badly as you would expect such people in with these beliefs to do when they separate from each
There's a
other.
you pointed out something very interesting I've been noticing more and more. This idea that this, and I don't like to call it Buddhism because I don't believe that's Buddhism. As a Muslim, I believe in Buddha as a prophet of God, because the Quran says that for every people we have sent a messenger. So I don't think this corrupt Western synthesized, whatever, dumbed down, altered version of Buddhism is real Buddhism. But you said something about a sort of acceptance of death, okay, of sort of giving up. And I see this more and more happening, whether people accept this westernized Buddhism or not, where they've given up on relationships, they're literally scared of having relationships. And I think there might be a new term for it. So, I think red pill is the idea of accepting reality, isn't it?
Well, red pill for men is they're going to go to the gym and get their bodies fit to have casual sex with lots of women,
Is that red
and
pill?
build up their
Okay.
bank account,
Right.
and make the best of the situation. But it doesn't really help them or their
Right. But
society in the end.
there's a new thing which seems to be the kind of the opposite of that, which is kind of like what you alluded to, which is a sort of death and giving up.
Antinatalism, perhaps.
It's kind of I kind of like it's kind of blue pillism. It's kind of like forget reality, just give up, just you accept losing. And that's why I'm seeing more and more. Like people would just say, you know what, I'm happy not being married and I'm 60 years old and I don't have any children. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
There's more and more of that. They've just given up. It's maybe blue pillism. Maybe it's going to be a new word or something of just giving up on life, as it were. And that's what this um, Western version of Buddhism seems to be pushing forward. It's like just accept, don't feel,
Yes.
don't do it.
You
And
own
Islam is
nothing and
very
be happy. That kind of thing. You
yes,
own
that's
nothing and
yeah,
be happy. Um,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
but recently I must tell you that that there's certainly something even worse, and what we've been talking about. So I was talking to this young man from America, and he hates his government, and the subject came to marriage and what he thought about it, and it was of course an idea horrible to him, and then he said, and it would be stupid to have children because your children are just going to be made into slaves by the state who are evil, and when you have children, this is what you are, giving your children to this evil, corrupt state, and you're stupid if you have children. It's that kind of attitude.
Yes, I mean, I spoke to somebody who not only is scared of having, I mean, I talk to lots of people who are scared of having a relationship because all they see is, you know, women, for example, I'm talking from a man's perspective, women who have no care for other people, the nightclub type, right? No care for long-term relationships or until it's too late, sort of thing. But he was saying that even the idea of sex is disgusting. He's saying, "Oh, have you thought about it? It's so disgusting," and it's like this excuse making for giving up. Because what you
Mm-hmm.
said sounds like excuse for giving up. It's like, oh, I'm not going to have children. They're going to ruin the world. That's a philosophy you've made to protect yourself in a way, to accept your failure in everything to do with relationships.
Yes, yes, and what you said just reminded me of this quote, and I think it's from ancient Greece, and it's I don't think I've heard of anything more pessimistic. So it says, "Don't have children; they may turn out to be bad, and if they are good, you will fear to lose them. So don't have children."
So I'm not sure if I've remembered. So the Islamic version is very much the opposite. But I hope I'm not misquoting, but I heard this many years ago, and it says, so you probably know Muslims are encouraged to have children, as in many religions, Judaism, Christianity, be fruitful, multiply is what you get from the Bible. In the Quran, it says, you should have lots of children. I'm sort of paraphrasing, this is how I remember it, so that you can have angels. You can raise angels against the devils. So it's not a very nice sort of way to say that the non-believers are devils, but in a way, and it's not a hateful way, it's the idea of you need to outnumber the we've already accepted statistically that people who are not raised up well become criminals and things like this,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you need to outnumber them so they can be possibly, and definitely in Islam, people are not beyond repair, as it were. So people who are devils, let's say, are not beyond becoming angels. But the idea is that it's very opposite to what this Greek person said many millennia ago. It's like, don't be pessimistic. In fact, we're optimistic. That's why Muslims have children, because they're actually, by having children, working towards a brighter future where Islamic principles they know those Islamic principles work, and they want to have lots of children to influence society. That's how I think a lot of Muslims see it. I don't know if you ever had a conversation like that with Muslims as to why they're so eager to have lots of children.
Well, I suppose that I assume that they come from a society where marriage is assumed, and obviously you're going to have children because, well, you're already married, and it makes sense to have more than one child in case the only one you have is no good.
Well, people
That
don't
sort of
really
thing.
think like that. In case it's not
Well,
enough,
I
or
suppose I'm talking about
yeah,
the sort of absolute pessimistic
yeah,
view,
yeah.
and there was something else I wanted to say.
There's a
And it's
number
gone
of
out.
reasons why we have lots of children, but I've only got a few minutes before I'm going to break my fast. But I'll give you a couple of reasons. So, besides the responsibility to make a better world in the future through well-trained children, um, there's also like the right for a man to have sex. Otherwise, he will look elsewhere. Things like that. These are very, very practical things, very healthy things. So everybody's got a responsibility towards the other person. And I can't think of any other reasons right now, but probably a lot of reasons why Muslims have lots of children.
Yes, well, what particularly impressed me about the Quran was that in the context of children, it's like do not be too proud of your wives and children, because amongst them may be enemies to you.
Okay, I
That,
can't remember that one.
that's one I
Yeah.
remembered, and
Oh, the other reason why Muslims have lots of children, and this is a very popular thing at the moment. I just had a discussion with a neighbor. This is a typical English person in Western mentality, is they question how expensive children are. And so Muslims are told, do not kill your children. Kill means including use contraception. You're allowed contraception, but not for this reason, for the fear of not being able to pay for your children, because it is not you who pays for them, it is your God. Okay, and logically that makes sense, because we would not have jobs if it wasn't for God, watering the world and creating an environment where something can be bought and sold. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yes,
it all starts from God, so it's God who takes care of them. So we're free from that fear or worry, and so we just have children. It's not entirely, it doesn't work perfectly like that, but it's close enough to that. I mean, it's up to the Muslim how in the individual Muslim, like my wife might say, okay, I've had enough, how many kids are we going to have, kind of thing, and things like that. And also, there's many other reasons why Muslims have lots of children, like multi-generational households, things like that. It really helps in taking care of children.
yes, yes. Economies of scale
Yes, that's true.
eventually kick in.
Yeah.
Well,
So I'm going to break my fast in a few minutes, but fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
thank you. Thank you for coming. I've enjoyed it enormously. I hope we can do it again, because have we covered all subjects, would you say? All the questions?
No, not nearly. We missed out. Why do I need religion to be spiritual, which is a very interesting topic by itself.
Yes.
But yeah, hopefully we'll cover that another time. We've
That
got
would
to
be
leave
great.
some of the good stuff for later, right?
Yes, yes. This is just a taster then.
Just a taster. Viewers, beware. Be ready for more. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. It's been amazing getting to know you, and I really look forward to making loads more videos with you. It'd be fascinating. Thank you so much.
Thank you for saying that, and I look forward to it too. And well, what am I supposed to say? Happy iftar, or what was it correct?
Not really. There's no real word for that.
Okay.
We just thank God before we break our fast. Like, thank you, God, for all the food. We
Oh,
trusted in you and things like that.
all right.
And I'm going to go to not even a mosque. It's going to be a little prayer, little club hall that we've hired out for 2 hours, and we're just going to eat together. So it's a really an amazing time, where
Yes.
people just eat together as sort of communes and
Uh-huh.
things like that. So
Sounds
yeah,
wonderful. Sounds wonderful. I
yeah.
know Muslim women who complain that they don't lose weight over Ramadan and in fact gain it.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting. That's a whole another discussion as to
Yes, yes.
uh,
Okay.
culture as well. All right.
All right. Thank you so much, and speak to you before too long, I hope.
Thank you. Peace be upon you.
And
Bye.
and to you.
Bye.
Bye bye.